What is wrong with the NBA? Why are there so many three-pointers being taken per game? How can this be changed? How can it be improved? Let's talk about it.
Jazz Smack, your source for information and analysis about the Utah Jazz and NBA basketball. Jazz Smack is a community for passionate Utah Jazz NBA fans.
All right, the NBA three-point line. It was introduced to the NBA in the 79-80 season. So that's the first year it was ever on the court. Prior to that, there was no three-point line. Since that time, in 79-80, the number of threes attempted per game has increased steadily, with some exceptions. There have been a couple of instances where there are big increases, but we have data beginning in the 83-84 season of the number of threes attempted per game, the number made, and the percentages. So we can look at the last 40 years of NBA seasons and see exactly how many threes were attempted per game on average, how many threes were made, and the resulting percentage. So that's what we're going to do. But those of us who grew up loving the game of basketball, loving the NBA, enjoying it immensely, remember a different game in the past, one that wasn't just so heavily reliant on threes. I mean, there's endless barrage of threes being taken in NBA games these days. And some of these games become really difficult to watch because when the three ball isn't going in and there's 50 threes taken, those games are unbearably boring. I mean, it just is. It's miserable. And this is one of the huge complaints, in my opinion, that NBA viewership has declined here in the United States, is many people, even diehard basketball fans such as myself, find the game much less appealing than it once was, simply because there's a lack of diversity of offensive schemes, offensive intentions. It's just become so heavily dependent on high pick and roll and just jacking threes and spreading the court around the three-point line. It's just become really difficult. Many of these nights are just so difficult to sit through some of these games. So let's look at the data, see where we were in the past, where we are today, and what we can do to actually change this, and what the NBA, with Adam Silver, they should look at the rules and find a solution to this issue. Because I'm certainly not the only one complaining about this. Many people are. And even some of the NBA players have mentioned that, well, look at how many three-pointers are being taken. Yes, it's an issue. The game could be improved significantly with some changes, some rules changes. Obviously, the coaches aren't going to change at this point. So to force change, some NBA rules are going to have to be changed. That's the only way it's going to... anything different's ever going to come is if the actual rules are addressed. So let's look at the data. So in the 83-84 season, let's just start with this. The number of threes attempted per game in 1983-84 was 2.4. 2.4 on average per game. That's incredible. Compared to where we are today, 2.4. And the shooting accuracy in 83-84, 25%, which is really poor. But if you're only taking 2.4, who cares? But let's look at how this increased over time. So let's just go by season and jump through this data. So I'm going to just go from season to season. We go from 2.4, the next season 3.1, next season 3.3, and then 4.7, and then 5, and then 6.6, and then 6.6 again, and then 7.1 to 7.6 to 9, and then in 93-94 we're 9.9 attempts per game. and shooting 33% at that point from the three-point line. So in 83-84, we started out with 2.4 at 25%, and in 93-94, we're at 9.9 attempts per game, shooting 33%. So let's move up and look at the more of this data in subsequent seasons. So we in 93-94 we were at 9.9, and we have a significant increase in the 94-95 season. We went from 9.9 in 93-94 to 15.3 in 94-95. Now, there's an actual reason for that increase that year. The NBA decided to change the rules and shorten the three-point line. So the three-point line was shortened for three seasons beginning in 94-95. And as a result of that, the number of three-point attempts increased by 54.5%. And the three-point shooting accuracy also increased significantly up to 36. So that was a big thing in those years because teams were a lot more comfortable. Offenses were much more inclined to shoot the three ball because of the shortened line. So that took place, and it occurred for three seasons. So the following three seasons it went up for the final season in 96-97 with that shortened three-point line. The number of threes attempted per game were nearly 17, and the three-point percentage was still around 36. So then in 97-98, the three-point line was replaced to where it was previously. So it was pushed out farther, and it went back to where it was previously, and the number of attempts went down. And this is one of the 3 times in all this data that I have for 40 years that there was actual decrease in the number of three-point field goals attempted from the previous year. So in that 97-98 season, we dropped to 12.7 per game. But then let's look at the next season, 98-99. It goes up to 13.2, and then the next season, 13.7, and then 13.7 again, and then 14.7, and then 14.7, and then 14.9, and then 2004-2005, it goes up to 15.8. And then to 2005-2006, it's up to 16. And in that year, we're shooting at the three-point percentage was 36%. And then in the following year, 2006-2007, we're up to 16.9. And then the next year, 18.1. And then 18.1 again. And then 18.1 for a third year in a row. And then a fourth year at 18. And then in 2011-2012, it went up to 18.4. In 2012-2013, it went up to 20. And then the next year, 21.5. And then the next year, 22.4. The following year, 24.1. 2016-2017, we're at 27. 2017-2018, we're at 29. 2018-2019, we're at 32. 2019-2020, we're at 34. 2020-2021, we're at 35. 2021-22, 35.2. 22-23, we're at 34.2. That's another decrease of 1. And then the next year, we're at 35.1. And then 24-25, this season, we are at 37.5 attempts per game. 37.5 three-point attempts per game on average in the NBA. That is an absolutely obscene number. The number of field goals attempted in the NBA per game on average this year is 89. So 37.5 of those 89 field goal attempts are three-pointers. This is the problem. There are just, from a watchability perspective, there are just way too many threes being taken. On the nights that they go in, at a high rate in the 40s, I mean, it's bearable. But on the nights where they don't go in and you're shooting in the low 30s or the 20s, it just is brutal. It's brutal to sit through that. It's just brutal. Just miss after miss after miss. This is where I think something needs to change. So I think the skill level of the shooters in the NBA has obviously increased over time, especially from the three-point line. And the only reason that we haven't seen the percentages improve significantly over the last decade, they've stayed roughly around 35 to, and there were a couple of years when went up to 37, as this spreadsheet demonstrates. But roughly, we're right around 35, 36 on most every year for the three-point field goal percentage. But the quality of those three-point field goal attempts has certainly declined in recent years. It used to be that when a three-pointer was taken, that was an open look. So people weren't taking contested threes like they are now. So I think if better three-pointers, if teams were a little bit more selective in the three-pointers they took, rather than taking contested threes, they only really took open threes, those percentages would increase, in my opinion. I think we would see higher percentages. But all these NBA guys are looking at analytics and they're saying, well, contested threes, even at the lower percentages, are better than taking twos, unless it's a dunk or a layup. That's the theory. That's why we have the situation that we have right now, with all these threes being taken and missed. But what could actually be done about this? I mean, what could actually change? In my opinion, again, I've heard others talk about this, but this was my opinion before I ever heard anybody else even suggest it. I think that the NBA should move the three-point line back, and I think they should eliminate the corner threes. I think the three-point line, that it should be an arc, a partial arc that runs into the sidelines, so that there are no more side threes. They're just taken out of the game completely and eliminated. That's it. No more stepping out of bounds in the corners for players trying to shoot threes, and it's very narrow in both corners, and people are always stepping out of bounds, and that's frustrating to watch as well. But in my opinion, if they just move the three-point line back and they run into the sideline, and then the three-point line is exactly the same distance from the rim at each point along the three-point line, I think that would be a better way of doing it, rather than having side three-pointers that are shorter than three-pointers at the top. And hopefully that would decrease the percentages of the three-pointer and fewer of them would be shot. That's my opinion. I think that's an easy solution to it, and they could give it a shot for 3 years and see if it changes. I'm not the only one with this opinion. I've heard others say it. I've heard others say that they just need to eliminate the side threes and run into the sideline. I think that's a solution that could be acceptable, and I think the NBA should give it a shot, because in the United States, viewership has certainly declined. Now, the three-point shooting isn't the only reason for that, but it's a significant one, because nobody just wants to see endless three-pointers shot and missed. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I mean, the NBA also needs to address the NBA lottery system where teams are incentivized to lose. And that's an obvious one. I've talked about that previously. That's a big point of contention with many people watching the NBA, having a system where where teams are incentivized to lose to get better draft position. I mean, that obviously needs to change as well. But from a watchability perspective on the court, of just for two teams trying to win, I mean, this endless barrage of three-pointers. I mean, there are some games this year where a team takes over 50 threes. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely absurd. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the three-point line, and it's interesting looking at the data. I pulled that data from Basketball Reference, and it's just interesting to look at the trends over time of how many threes are actually being attempted and how that has changed the schemes that NBA coaches are running. And in my opinion, it's not for the better. But anyway, thank you for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe, and we will talk to you all again. Have a great night, everyone.